Hello. So I'm here Sunday. Um, Today is traditional witchcraft, and going to talk a little bit first about me in particular, and then after that, I'm going to talk about early witches and what they may have done or done. So, I am a traditional witch. That has never changed. I have interest in herbology, animism, folk medicine, folklore, and shamanism. That has never changed. And Tradcraft, the abbreviated form, leans into like the lived experience. And of course, it's land based and ancestral knowing. How do these, reinforce each other? Well, you're working with spirits of place. Okay, I'm not worried about the spirits on the other side of the highway. I'm worried about the spirits right here. Now there is a certain area, like it starts with your immediate area, and then it goes into the like kind of like the neighborhood you're in, that area, and then it would spread into the town that neighborhood is in, and then it would spread out more into the county, like that. Your practical magic, that's tied to your daily life, everything you do. Ancestral and regional customs, you focus on that, and your personal gnosis over any kind of dogma. Now, the herbology and the folk medicine, this is like the hands-on stuff. This is the body and earth side of my craft. And it's all about plant allies. Now, those are for healing, for protection, and spirit work. And learning about all the local flora and their historical uses. I will walk my property a lot. Okay, at least once a day. I can always find something different. I can always find, something. I'm learning about the local flora and their historical uses. The colonists that came here, the farmers that came here, the Native Americans that were here. What did they know? How did they use it? Did they use it? Did they bring it? And it's about building the bridge between the physical and the magical properties of plants. Now, in animism, and a lot of people have problems with this worldview. It's understandable because a lot of people will be coming from, a Christian religion, or at least raised in a Christian household, and animism is like not a thing. Okay, plants, and they're just, these are possessions. Okay, they don't have spirits of their own in that thing, because I came from one of those. And this is the worldview that makes everything come together, is the animism. This links it all. The thinking of plants as they're beings, and they're not just ingredients for your spells or your food. And the land is what I work with, and it's not just, the scenery around me, the trees and the bushes and all that. Even the tools that I work with, they have their own presence. And then the folklore. This is the cultural memory that my path is based on. The charms, superstitions, cures, the classification of spirits, and the local myths. Researching ways that people have practiced magic throughout the ages. And then the shamanic techniques. This is another one that the shamanic or shaman gets like misinterpreted, everything. This is not about cultural appropriating. I'm talking about the universal wide techniques, the journeying, the trance work, the spirit negotiation, the soul retrieval, or cleansing practices. They're called shamanic because that's what shamans do. But they're not the only ones that do that. They are just shamanic techniques. And these methods are the relationship that I seek to deepen with the unseen or the spirits, always seeking to deepen that. I'm drawn to the relational side of magic or witchcraft. I grow on my path by listening, observing, and interacting with the world around me. And what that means is I learn best through a direct experience. I value my intuition just as much as what I study. And I'm comfortable with the in-between spaces. This is my practice that I'm building, and I'll always be building it, and it's not my religion. The practical ways that I look to deepen my craft are just the simple ways that align with my interests. Building a plant spirit catalog that's not just a list of correspondences. I want to know how a plant feels. What is this plant saying? How does it behave when I use it in magic? And also, how does it behave when I take it medicinally? I include local folklore in my grimoire, things like ghost stories from my area or in North Florida, and then maybe in Florida as a whole. Old remedies that were used in the olden days, like, what did your grandma use? I'm not talking about Mercurochrome, okay? Other stuff. Weather lore, superstitions, always researching the local spirits or the creatures' tales. And how does this contribute to my grimoire? These things give me a kind of a map of the unseen world that's right around me. I work on developing a spirit of place practice, which is a huge part of all of it. The daily offerings, the walking my land, like I said, which I try to do daily, at least weekly. Researching my area's history. Like in my town, small little town, there is like, this is like a one light town, okay? It's one of those. I know the oldest house. I know the oldest street. I can see the oldest buildings. What used to be places where they worked on automobiles, general store where it used to be, that kind of stuff. It's still there. And trying to build that relationship with the local spirits. Now, the animism and the shamanism, they meet up in the trance and the journey work exploration. You know I do rhythmic drumming. I made my own drum. Breath work. What they call the hedge crossing, and dream work. The folk healing is what I feel, that's the simplest spirit work for daily life. Making tea blends, poultices, oils, tinctures, balms, the smoke cleansing. Do not call it saging. The charm bags, the protections. The green world or the plants is what feels most alive on my path right now, mainly because that has to do with the time of year. And I don't want this to just be using herbs, okay? I strive to be in a relationship with the plant spirits. This is not about correspondences or even just recipes. It's about learning a plant's personality and listening to it instead of just harvesting it. Letting it tell me how it's to be used. You look at the shape of the plant. Does it sting you when you touch it? Do the seed pods explode when you touch them? Does it have flowers? What color are they? All that kind of stuff. Healing and magic work together. I don't believe they work just because I have the ingredients. This is what I feel is the heart of my animistic witchcraft. There are things that I'm always trying to do to work on my plant connection. Sitting with a plant. Kind of like what you would call it meditation with it. It's just one, okay? I pick one. A native one is best. That's what I aim for. And you just sit a few minutes in the day for when I have that few minutes. I try to figure out how I feel when I'm doing this. Does it make me feel anything emotion-wise? Or do I see some kind of images? Or do I have memories of it? What are those memories of me and that plant? Does it feel different in the evening than it does in the morning? I want to learn the plant's voice. This is the plant's voice. What do you do on your path? That's a big part of it. Keeping a check on the plants where the plant's whole cycle of growing, like a nettle plant. Okay, and our nettle plants here are not the same ones from, say, Britain. Okay, and over there, y'all's have larger leaves and stuff, and I think the further up here, you get larger leaves. In Florida, it's different. The heat hits different. The sun hits different in Florida. So you got those when they first coming up, and then they get to the end part where it's putting out seeds, and that's what you're interested at that point of its life cycle, is those seeds and not the leaves anymore. Kind of like that, the whole cycle. How long does it take to grow from seed? Is it difficult to grow from seed? Some things are. What insects are drawn to it? What kind of insects or bugs do you see on the plant? Does it take a whole lot of water or not? Does it need a lot of sun or not? Needing a lot of sun, that's one thing I've also learned. When you buy plants, it'll say like full sun. Not for Florida. I've learned that can be a whole big reason why something doesn't grow as lushly here or as fast here as it would, say, in Georgia or on further up. Like I said, sun hits different here. It may need dappled, part sun, part shade. That's a learning thing. And what does it want? And can I give it that? A book can tell you a lot, but two people can have a different outcome with the same plant in the same area, despite what a book tells you or where you buy that plant. Now, before I pick or harvest this plant or from it, what does it want from me? Does it need water in return? Should I clean around it or deadhead or trim it? Does it like singing or music? Does it want some of my hair? Maybe plant seeds from it somewhere else, like take seeds from it, take them somewhere else and plant them. This is like being active in your animism. And some plants can thrive in my region and be good allies for me. And some plants, witches have probably worked with for generations around here. People not necessarily called witches, Yarrow is protection, divination, spirit communication. Pine is cleansing, grounding, ancestral connection. Mugwort is dreams, trance, hedge crossing. Elder is healing, boundaries, spirit, and negotiation. Saul palmetto. I do not have any on this property. I would like to get some. And it would be native. I just don't happen to have any growing on here. That is strength, endurance, and masculine healing. Spanish moss. I have that. Even though it's not really Spanish and it's not really a moss. That's another video. This is liminal magic, spirit work, and binding. And then sweet gum. I have one growing. I actually got it from down the road that I actually live on and brought it here. Protection, banishing, and charm making. You know, the witch's balls, the little thorny looking sweet gum balls, those. They all have their distinct personalities. And you can see that just looking at them. And sometimes a plant will choose a witch. So is there a plant? They can be wild or cultivated. That's been drawing your attention lately. Maybe you don't even know why. And maybe that plant is your ally. Something to think about. So now we're going to talk about, like I said, I've always researched witches, fascinated always by the Salem witch trials, and then only, going through that, learning that, oh, this went out further than that, when you're younger. So what some early witches did. Now, of course, this is based on historical records, trial testimony, folklore, cunning craft accounts, and anthropological evidence. So you have the folk magic and the cunning work. Now, most historical witches, they were folk practitioners. They weren't these great philosophers of the occult, like, you would picture them. They worked with herbs. They did healing, also did poisoning and protection. They had charms, spoken charms, written charms, knotted charms. They had amulets made of iron, rowan wood from Britain, hagstones, bones. I've never found a hagstone on a beach. I found a river hagstone. I believe that was 2 years ago. So I was happy with that. Household magic, the hearth, the threshold. You got the barn, you got the livestock. And weather magic, storm raising, wind knots, protection from hail. The healing rites, the laying on of hands. Charm recitation and poultices. Practical, everyday acts. No ritual involved. Then you had the spirit work and the familiar spirits. This is one of the most consistent features across Europe. The historical witches, they worked with familiar spirits. We'll talk about that another time. The animal, human, or spirit-shaped. They entered pacts, agreements with these spirits. They received knowledge, power, or healing ability from these spirits. They fed them with milk, blood, bread, or offerings, just like you would feed any other spirit. They called on them for divination, protection, or malefic magic. This was the core of the craft. Even the witch trial records, despite being biased, consistently described witches as meeting spirits, receiving magical instruction, being taught charms, and being given spirit helpers. This aligns with older European animism and shamanic survivals. Then you have the trance, the night flight, and the hedge crossing. Early witchcraft involved ecstatic practices, including the trance states, the spirit flight, that is flying to sabbats, riding animals, traveling in spirit. Dream magic, soul journaling, crossing into the other world. These appear in witch trial confessions, in fairy lore, in shamanic parallels, and medieval accounts of night travelers, Benedante traditions in Italy, and the wild hunt myths. There is no literal broomstick flying. It is ecstatic, visionary, and liminal. Then you have the blood, bone, and death magic, which a lot of people, especially in modern time, are like, nah. But witches work with grave dirt, bones, skulls, blood, hair, nails, bodily fluids, and animal remains. Death was a source of power. Cemeteries, crossroads, even gallows sites were magical hotspots. It wasn't even about the dark aesthetic. It was simply functional magic. Then you have the cursing and the counter cursing. This is another thing that is like pushed away. Witches were known for hexing, for blasting, that is causing illness and misfortune. The withering crops, spoiling the milk, averting curses, breaking a bewitchment, and protection magic. Harm none was not a thing. Cursing was a tool, a response to injustice, a community service sometimes, and a form of social control. Then there's the herbalism and the poison craft. They were knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, about the poisonous plants, the entheogens, that's the henbane, the belladonna, the datura, mandrake. They knew about folk remedies, and they knew about animal-based medicines. And this is where we get into the flying ointments to induce the trance or the spirit flight. And this is where the witch's broom myth originates from. We'll talk about that then too. Household and domestic magic. Witchcraft was woven into the daily life. The hearth magic, the protection of livestock, the blessing of the fields, the charm bags, knot magic, iron and salt protections, milk and butter magic, bread and grain rites. This was the magic of survival. Now, the witches' social role, they were the healers, they were the midwives, the charmers, the curse breakers, the weather workers, the diviners, and the spirit workers. They were also feared, but respected. They were sought out for some of these things. They were also blamed, but they were also consulted on some of these things. Witchcraft was their function. It was not just who they were. Then you have the devil, the man in black, or the witch's master. This is probably the most misunderstood part. And still, it won't matter. Everyone's going to have their ideal of what that is to them. That's fine. And in many traditions, witches have described meeting a spirit teacher, a man in black, a fairy king or a queen, a familiar spirit that was in human form, and this liminal being offering knowledge. It was spirit-packed tradition that Christians called devil worship. And in the trials, the devil would often resemble a fairy being or a trickster figure, an ancestral spirit even, an initiatory guide, land spirits even. Now, the initiation, the oaths, and the secret knowledge. Tradcraft involved oaths, the secret charms, the passed down rites, the spirit-given knowledge, and the family traditions and coven and group initiations. Knowledge was earned. It was also taught by spirits, by the elders, and it was guarded. Tradcraft is often practice-based. So that is our delve into traditional craft, witchcraft today. I have my things mixed up. How I'm using it, how they used it, which the stuff didn't just happen in modern age out of thin blue sky. People started writing books and making up this shit. No, it had to come from somewhere. And we have the trial documents and all that. We have all these things from in that time written, okay? So it was a thing. So until next video, I'll see you there.